Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Chris, I'd like to get your perspective on where we are with stock assessments for sharks. I know they all fall into different categories, large coastals, pelagics. Can you give us a current status of where those stock assessments are when the latest stock assessment was done for large coastals, for pelagics? There's recently, too, been a cessation or a ban on catching Mako sharks, specifically longfin and shortfin Makos. Can you give us an update on where we are with current stock assessments?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. NOAA manages approximately 63 shark stocks. I don't have the specific numbers regarding where the stock assessments are for each of those. I can speak a little bit to the Mako issue as a resolution or a measure that was agreed to in an international fora in the ICAT fora that bans retention of shortfin Mako in the North Atlantic.
I'll let you get to that question, but I want to drill down a little bit further on stock assessments, because stock assessments really get to the earlier regulatory action taken on essentially stopping any sort of viable catch of large coastals. And the idea is that those stocks needed to recover. And because sharks have long gestation times, the thought was, well, we have to have much longer periods when these closures exist. The challenge with that is you also have to have stock assessments to determine where the recovery is, and we have not had a recent stock assessment. I'd love for you to get that information to the committee. I think that's incredibly important. One thing, too, I asked you to comment on is we know that sharks are different than other fish. Sharks are live bearers. So when they don't spawn, so it's not like you have to have eggs that are out there and be fertilized by sperm, and you have lots of little larvae and they swim around. You have all kinds of plankton eaters that eat them. So you have to have millions of eggs in order to get a handful of fish. Sharks are live bearers, which means their survivability of their young is much, much greater. So I was going to ask several things. Has NIMS looked at fecundity of sharks in relation to mortality? And have you looked at survival rates based on them being live bearers and how the stocks are managed and where the stocks are today currently? And if you haven't done a recent stock assessment, shouldn't that inform where we are today in looking at population recoveries? And I would like to hear your perspective on ICAT's determination and stoppage of catch of shortfin Makos here in the Atlantic.
Thank you for that question, Congressman. Again, I don't have the specifics on the status of the stock assessments for all of the species, but would be very happy to get you more information.
Can you speak to any of the science behind how those stock assessments are made, the nature of how sharks reproduce, their fecundity, biomass as it relates to spawning biomass versus biomass that is reaching spawning age? I mean, all those things are dynamics about how management should happen under Magnuson-Stevens. I would expect that you would know at least how the agency has looked at that and where you are today, assessing how you're managing that species, which is a statutory requirement under Magnuson-Stevens for the agency.
Thank you. I appreciate your question, and the agency is committed to using the best available.
I understand. Listen, I don't question the agency's commitment. What I want from you is an answer as to the science. You say that you're an agency based on science, based on the statutes in Magnuson-Stevens. I would hope that you could speak a little bit to that, because the mechanics of how these decisions are made and what decisions are made are critical to not only the stock itself, but also to the current situation we find ourselves in.
I do appreciate your question. I am not familiar with the specifics of how the stock assessments are conducted with respect to the shark species, but we can get that information to you.
Can you speak then to the shortfin Mako ban?
I can speak to the shortfin Mako ban. There has been an issue with the stock recovery associated with shortfin Mako. And the United States has taken extraordinary efforts over the past many years to reduce our mortality of the species by implementing circle hooks and improving all sorts of our fisheries management. Unfortunately, based on the efforts by the United States alone, the global stock status of Shortfin Mako in the Atlantic continued to suffer. Therefore, actions were taken internationally to ensure that the stock could rebuild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.